Hello, listeners. Welcome back again to another episode of the Known and Never podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Bromley, and this week it is the Hannibal Fan Support Network. We will be going through the incidents at PNE on Saturday as the Clarets turn over yet another 0-0 draw to add to the long list of 0-0 draws this season. A precious point to push towards promotion or an opportunity lost. We will let our panel decide on that. We'll also cover that fantastic evening at home to Hull Wednesday evening where the Clarets looked like they were taking the handbrake off and would maybe being a bit more proactive towards a promotion in an automatic spot. I'm joined this week by regular panellists Rich Steele and George Poole, who will be giving you their thoughts as we break down those two games. So for now, buckle up, let's go. Rich, good evening, sir. How are you?
Yeah, good evening, Natalie. Good evening, listeners. I'm very good. So looking forward to chewing the fat of what's been a busy time for the Clarets.
It really has. And George, how are you, sir?
Yeah, all good, thank you. Managed to get to Preston at the weekend, which was nice. Yeah, it was nice to get to Preston. Slightly different from Australia, but probably just as good because really nice. Even though 0-0 was a bit disappointing, I thought the atmosphere was fantastic and there's a real optimism that still remains after the 0-0 as well.
It took George 2 seconds to mention that he's been working in Australia. I thought
No.
Look at me in Australia, living my young life. We're not jealous at all, George. Go up, George, and get.
I wasn't going to say anything, but Natalie raised it. No, I'm not.
I did. I feel like I've created tension in the group.
Jealous, George.
I've got to say, we did get quite a few messages from our lovely listeners who were wishing George well in his endeavours down under, and also saying like, we'll really miss you on the podcast. Like, thanks for your time. And I was like, oh, has he actually quit? Like, it hadn't occurred to me that he quit, and you were literally gone for about 2 weeks, and then you were back. So I was like, he's just on holiday. It's fine. It's fine. Well, it's good to have you back. It's good to have you the right way around rather than being upside down. We have 2 games to cover. We've got the Preston game, the Lancashire Derby on Saturday, another 0-0 for the Clarets, and a missed opportunity to leapfrog, albeit possibly for a short term, Sheffield United into second place. And we've also got the home tie from Hull midweek, which we need to cover as well. 2 very different games, 2 very different results, and I guess 2 very different performances for one way or the other. But there is only one way that we can start this week's episode, and that was the incredibly unsavoury incident on Saturday involving Hannibal and accusations of some racist abuse from a PNE player aimed at him. We're going to cover this first because it's important and we want to show our support. There's been a real outpouring of fans asking us how they can support Hannibal. We are absolutely behind him 100%. So I wanted us to put our take on that. And Rich, I'm going to give you the floor with this one. What's your take on the incident?
Yeah, ultimately, first and foremost, everybody wants any type of racism, discrimination to be kicked out of football. We've watched Hannibal now, for the last 6 months. Yes, he's a player on the edge, but something has obviously been said for him to go from, he was almost like smiling, when the ball was going away, to all of a sudden completely reacting like that, the way he did. He's never had any previous history in his career so far of alleging that somebody's shouted, racial abuse to him. And my job on here isn't to say whether the Preston player said it or not, and I'm sure the powers that be will do the due diligence on that. But ultimately, it's something that needs kicking out of the game, and you could see how distraught he was. Obviously, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but Osmajic, I think, has come out that he said, F you, bad man. So, however people want to...
that well-used phrase.
My view is, I think that as a defence, he's quite weak. But again, the powers that be will determine that. And as Burnley, we've had our history of unsavoury incidents to do with racism. There's no point not saying that. For me, the worst moment of me supporting Burnley was when that White Lives Mata banner flew across the Etihad just after COVID. That was a very difficult moment for me. But what I was really proud of was the way that Burnley responded.
Yeah.
Again, the very vast majority of fans, really condemned that banner. I'm finding it quite. And I really like Preston. I went to university in Preston. I've got a lot of mates who are Preston fans. It's a fantastic city. It doesn't seem like the minority to me are supporting this player. And I get it. Football's tribal and you want to support your players. We all support our players. But if this was a Burnley player in this situation, I'd be very, very quiet until the thorough investigation has took place. And there's a lot of noise. Whether that's supporting the Preston player, okay, that's fine, but also calling Hannibal, and I've seen a lot of stuff that Hannibal said to cause the reaction, which seems very fabricated. But I'm sure, like I said, the FA will do their due diligence. But like I said, all the players and all the supporters at Burnley Football Club back Hannibal. He's somebody who, he made a mistake against Stoke, but overall, I've really, really enjoyed watching him play for the club personally. I think he's getting better all the time. And to me, like that, you do have to think something's been said. And it's not like
incredible reaction, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's not like Hannibal's a foreign player who's only come this season and you can say his English isn't great. I've listened to him a lot and his English is very, very good. He's been at Man United from a young age. So I'd be very surprised if he's misinterpreted what the Preston players said, but
that doesn't make sense because the terminology that the Preston players said that he said, that's just not a commonly used phrase. You don't call somebody a bad man. Like it's not a colloquialism. It's not a form of abuse. It's just not something that we use.
And ultimately, just one last thing for me. And ultimately, it's very hard to look past the point that this player bit somebody.
Yes.
And said he didn't.
When the footage showed him doing it. Yeah, it's like he doesn't have credibility.
Clear, of course, but I think you've got to be careful, me as a teacher, you don't want to blame a student for doing something because they've done something in the past, because you can get into trouble with that. But yeah, I think the player's past history doesn't look good for him personally. And I think Preston fans, some of them have got to be careful with what they say.
Yeah. George, let's bring you in on this, please. And Rich has already touched on this, and it's definitely something that I want to. Rich, we can still see you. Just he forgets he's on camera. It's genuinely quite hilarious. Rich did touch on this, and it's something that I want us to bring up on here. I thought both Hannibal and the official, everybody, Hannibal himself, the officials, the benchers, the Preston bench, everybody handled this scenario impeccably well. We know Hannibal's lost his head at times this season. We know he's an emotional player. We know that if he gets booked, we probably have to hook him off because he's likely to get sent off. He has been sent off. He was so calm in his reaction. He knew exactly what to do. He went straight to the referee, said, "I've got to report this, stop the game." The referee said, okay. He went right to the bench where he was supposed to do. And I just thought that whole scenario, the referee explaining it to everybody, the reaction of Stuart McCall, is that how you pronounce it, Stuart? It's Stuart McCall, isn't it? The Preston assistant. What's he called? Yeah, it is. Sorry. Thank you. For those of you listening to the podcast, the guys who are on mute on the TV are nodding at me, which is not awfully helpful for a podcast episode. But George, yes, let's cover that thing, because I think that whole situation was spectacular. Do you agree?
Yeah, I absolutely do agree. As you've alluded to, Hannibal was a player who sometimes lets his emotions get the better of him. For all the good stuff he's done on the pitch, there's also been unfortunate incidents, and obviously the red card was a low point. But probably the most surprising aspect of Saturday was the way he handled himself in a positive light. You could tell, as Rich said, immediately as soon as Osmajic, or however you pronounce his name, I'm afraid I'm not overt with that.
We are struggling a bit with this, aren't we? We are struggling with.
Yes, it doesn't help. but as soon as he said something, Hannibal reacted in that there'd been something nasty said. But instead of reacting by turning towards the striker, he reacted by turning his back and running straight to the referee and reporting the incident, which I think is the correct thing to do. And you've got to wonder whether maybe there's been some really good education on this by the FA or the Football League prior to the season in terms of what to do in the case of a racist abuse. But yeah, I thought Parker spoke well after the game. It's one of those instances where even now it's a bit hard to talk about because at the end of the day, you know, we'll support Hannibal, but you don't know entirely what's been said. You don't know what might be proved, might be possible to prove. So it's hard to comment completely, but Parker struck a good tone, I thought. And yeah, I guess we'll just have to wait to see what
very well, doesn't he? He does speak very well.
Yeah, I think it helps when, you know, you can tell someone's a nice person. It makes you root for them, which I think is what has given him the edge over a company at times who seemed a bit self-obsessed. But anyway, that's going down a rabbit hole.
Well, let's not go down. Let's not pick that up again. I'm tired of the whole thing. Somebody asked me I was doing a piece for, oh God, who was it for? I was collaborating with somebody this week, and the whole company thing came up, and I was just like, oh, I'm so tired of that conversation. Can we move on, please? I think it was around the Champions League, but anyway, whatever. Okay, that's where we are on that. We will wait to see what happens. This is obviously going to be taken very seriously by the PFA and the Football League and both clubs as well. I thought Burnley's, our club's announcement was very, very strong. I thought Preston's was less so. And, you know, sometimes football can be bad for this. Sometimes it's not about protecting your asset. It's not about protecting your player, because football is more than anything. This is more important. Stamping out racial abuse in society is more important than any football game in the world, and we absolutely stand by that decision and that idea and those values to live by. Rich, back to you. Let's move back on to them, Preston, because it was a good performance by the Clarets. Another 0-0 that absolutely should have been a 2-0. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think this was different than the other 0-0s. I think obviously it's not, but say if this was our second 0-0 of the season, I don't think people would have raised any eyebrows. But because it comes, you know, it's another 0-0 after the record-breaking season of them. It feels like such a big disappointment. But like I said initially, this was different. We didn't batter Preston in terms of their goalie had an amazing game or anything like that, but we were definitely the better team. We would have, I thought Preston played well, to be fair to them. I thought they've played well in both games. I don't know. I've literally watched Preston in one other game this season, and that was against Leeds, and I thought they played really well in that game. So it surprises me that they were a little bit as low as they are. Really, I wouldn't say there was much difference between them and Blackburn. Maybe they struggled to put the ball in the net, and that's the reason for that. But yeah, we should have won the game. And ultimately, we're not on here to blame Lyle Foster. I've got a lot of time and respect for him.
Yeah.
And he's a striker. He's playing on the wing, isn't he? But he's just not a natural goal scorer. And unfortunately, he had that little bit of a spell in the Premier League at the start of last season where he was flying. But yeah, there's been a few occasions this year where he's had time to think about his finishes, and fortunately, he's not put the ball in the back of the net. The first one's a shocker, really. The ball's come at him with no real pace, and he's leaned back and he's blasted it, back to Burnley. And the second one, he's actually worked it quite well. He sent the defender, and he's just hit the wrong side of the post. And it's a real shame that one didn't go in, because I think that would have done his confidence a lot of good. And then we huffed and puffed second half. I thought Edwards was superb when he came on. I think he's got to be starting for us now. He's a level above what we've got, and I thought he really made a difference. On another day, that the cross across goal could have been deflected in. It went over. I think the Preston player got lucky to get a little toenail on the ball, but Preston fans would say that was a good tackle. Yeah, and ultimately, it's another frustrating 0-0 draw. And to me, going back to when we drew 0-0 against Pompey, where we didn't play well at all, we didn't look like winning. It was a different, that was more just we were rubbish. Where this one was a real frustration and a real disappointment that we didn't get the 3 points that we deserved. And on the other hand, I've watched Sheffield United's recent games and they've not looked great at all, but they've managed to get 9 points from them. And they seem to find a way to get that goal, you know, at Luton at the weekend, where we just can't quite put it in the back of the net at the moment. So it's frustrating. Still all to play for, in my opinion. But yeah, it's a real frustrating one not to win that you know, win the game on Saturday.
Yeah, George, what do we do with Lyle Foster? He's clearly a talented footballer. He's clearly a positive influence in the dressing room. The players clearly think a lot about him. I don't think that's under any dispute at all. But he isn't a natural goal scorer, which is kind of a prerequisite for being a number 9. He was showing signs of being effective on that left wing, and particularly in the absence of anybody else on the left wing, he was doing as good a job as anybody else we've got in the club. But that's kind of fallen off a little bit now. So we've got a real asset in Lyle Foster that should be a really valuable asset to the club, but I don't really know what we can do with him.
For me, he's due a time out the team, to be honest. You know, all the respect in the world for everything he's done whilst at Burnley and promoting, you know, the importance of mental health and the way the club have supported him on that. Fantastic. But at the end of the day, obviously, football's football, and on Saturday he missed two chances that had to be put away. And those 2 chances at the end of the day can be the difference between, you know, automatic promotion or settling for the playoffs and then, you know, perhaps missing out at Wembley or in the semi-finals. So for me, he needs to be out of that starting 11 and replaced by Marcus Edwards, given that Edwards now has, you know, had a couple of games to come off the bench and just test his fitness. And I totally appreciate that he couldn't be brought in straight away, but it's very clear to me that he's a level above what we've got there. And whether it means Anthony moving across to the left and then and Edwards playing on the right, so be it. But Edwards has to be starting. He's a level above, and we need to start winning games. We really can't afford many more, if any more, you know, draws at this rate, because those top 2 are beginning to pull away a little bit.
Yeah, that's true. Who does Edwards come in for? Who gets sacrificed? Is it as simple as a straight strop with Foster? How do you balance the team around Rich in terms of bringing Edwards in?
Yeah, I think it'll probably just be a straight swap for you know, for Foster. You know, probably Anthony will go to the other wing, which is a shame for Anthony, really, because he's been playing overall really well on that right.
One of our best players at the moment.
Yeah, I like Anthony. Listen, he's not, you know, he's not a fully fit Benton. I don't, but you know, and sometimes he struggles with his final bit, his final ball. But overall, I think he's a good player. You know, I think he's improved a lot. You know, there's the argument. I think Foster, in some ways, would offer you more as a number 9 than Fleming. I think we really lack.
Well, that's my next question. Yeah, that leaves us with Fleming as number 9.
Yeah, I think Fleming's doing a job. He scored some good goals for us this season. His goal scoring record actually of late pretty good. But if he's not scoring, he doesn't offer loads. And I think Foster would offer more, actually, like a little bit of a threat of running in behind. I think he'd be able to run the channels more. I think going back to we said we won't mention it, but going back to that company season when we was at our best, we had Barnes up front and we had Teller running in behind, and we don't have that threat this season. But ultimately, like George said, you know, where at least Fleming, he's not perfect in front of goal. You know, you feel more confident of him putting a chance away than Foster. So I think Fleming probably still gets the nod at the moment. And then moving ahead to Friday night, it's harsh on him because I think he's done a good job, but I'd like to see Hannibal drop a little bit and play next to Cullen, and Brown will come back into the side in that advanced position.
And drop Loren.
Yeah. Also, like I said, it's harsh, and I think Loren does a lot of great work off the ball, and he's a good athlete. But like, I think that type of game against Sheff Wednesday, who are a good side, by the way, I think it'll be, you know, I just think he's a little bit limited on the ball, but he's still been a great signing.
He has, and to his credit, Loren, we've not massively missed Brownhill over the last couple of games. You know, we do miss him to an extent, but it could have been a lot worse than it actually was. George, what was the difference then, I guess, from an attacking threat? You know, the home game against Hull, which completely dominated that game, went 2 goals up in the first half, just were able to completely see the game out the second half without having to even break a sweat. But it was a much more of a challenge on Saturday. Like, what was the difference between the 2 sides and the 2 performances for you?
I think context is key in that. I think Hull and Preston obviously goes without saying, but two different sides, and especially in the sense that, gosh, I just said in the sense as though I was Scott Parker, but in the sense that Hull really didn't show up last Wednesday evening. To their credit, I thought they bought really well in January, and this new manager comes with a decent reputation, but they really just did not show up. They made work relatively easy for us. We scored 2 goals, in the first half. If you score when you're on top, you're always, more likely to look like the more impressive and more imposing team. And it was sort of the opposite of that on Saturday. Preston are a team that are set up very well, structurally sound, with a manager in Heckingbottom. It's not too surprising to see that. And when you don't score when you're on top, nerves start to creep in. And I think overall, to be honest, the first half performance was good from us, and we really obviously should have been going in with the lead. But once you go into the second half 0-0, and you're starting to think about an 11th 0-0 of the season, pressure starts to ramp up, and Preston become more determined to hold on to their clean sheet. And the game just crept away from us on Saturday. I thought it wasn't until Edwards was introduced that we had an extra impetus. And even then, it just felt like it wasn't going to be our day. We had the penalty shout, which could have been given. Like, it really could have been given. And then obviously with no VAR, it would have stood. The opportunities that go begging. It just felt like things were getting away from us. And that is ultimately how it turned out come full time. Now, if that was just a one-off game, you'd be content with it. You win your home games, you draw your aways, you're getting promoted. It's just unfortunate that we're at this point now where, even though we've definitely been playing better in the last few weeks and we have been creating more, we can't afford to be drawing games because those around us are winning and clipping away from us now.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. It leads me on to the next topic, does that, Rich? In his post-match interview, Parker talked about how he wasn't concerned with Burnley's lack of goal scoring. And he said, there's a lot of narrative about setting up to protect the 0-0 and stuff. But, I'm not worried about the lack of goals. How can you not be worried about the lack of goals when, as it stands at the moment, we look completely set on to be in the playoffs and not challenge properly for an automatic spot? So I guess my question to you is twofold. Number one, is automatic promotion now too far ahead of us? Have we left it too late and drawn too many games? And then the second part, what do we do with the resources that we now have to try and close that gap on Sheffield United and creep into automatics?
Yeah, I'll go back to your first point. I think Parker does know the lack of goals is definitely a worry. I think, what managers say in press conferences, you've got to take it with a pinch of salt because they can't, they've got to be seen to be calm, backing the players, etc. And then your second point in terms of automatic promotion, do I think it's completely gone? No, absolutely not. Leeds and Sunderland play tonight. Leeds and Sheffield United play next weekend. So, one of the two teams have got to drop points. When you look at it on paper, Leeds, Sheffield in particular have got harder fixtures for us to come. But as George said, and we did that against Hull, the home games, and Friday night against Sheffield Wednesday, we've got to be winning these games now. We can't be affording too many draws, but there is a lot of football to be played. Do I think we get automatic? No. I actually, people may disagree on me on this. I don't think we've got a better team overall or a better squad than Leeds or Sheffield United. I think it can be maybe disputed about us and Sheffield United are very, very similar. As I've said before, they just seem to have that little bit of extra quality, to get goals. And I think they recruited better than us in the January transfer window. Did Sheffield United. But listen, he's not going to turn into Messi, but I am hoping that Edwards can be that little bit of creativity that we do need. People were saying on Saturday, should have Benson been brought on. Do I personally think Benson would have made a difference in that type of game where it's very physical at this moment in time? No. But then again, what's the harm in chucking him on for 20 minutes to see if he couldn't make a difference? And there is times where you want to release the handbrake a little bit more. So I don't think it's over yet. But like George said, against Hull, we scored that early goal and you can breathe a little bit then. You can see the players are nervous in the final third. Like you said, Foster's nervous in front of goal. And I think until we do start having a run of games where we're scoring in each game, the longer it goes on 0-0, we are going to get more nervous as the second half goes on.
Yeah.
I think the last time or the last league game that we scored in the second half was Blackburn, which was at the very, very start of January. So it seems like if we don't get that goal in the first half, we seem to lose a little bit of belief to get it in the second half.
Yeah. George, we have to round off this podcast by sticking with a positive. And I think this was you, Rich. I think it was you who said in our private chat that one of the disappointing things this season in terms of the narrative around lack of goals and the transfer windows, et cetera, is that some really great things this season have been missed in terms of celebrating. And we have to finish this podcast by just giving some absolute acknowledgement to our incredible defence. And I think I did a piece on our sponsors talkSPORT earlier on this evening talking about that record. And to me, it feels very different than the old defensive Burnley that we were famous for under the Dyche years, which were maybe absorb the pressure, stick 11 men behind the ball. You've got Ben Mee putting his face on the ball on the line and talk his last gasp. It doesn't feel like that kind of defensive resilience. It feels classier. It feels more modern. And at times it's a real work of art. So I think we give you the floor as a tribute, I think, to just how remarkable that defence of ours is this season.
You make it sound like it's Friday night at the pub and I'm an ABBA tribute band or something. What do you expect me to come out with?
If the shoe fits, young George, if the shoe fits, you made that analogy, not me. But no, just listen, how good are they? How amazing is this defence?
They're astonishing, and I guess maybe I should tee me up to say it's not just the defence, and I think that's part of it. It's not a case of backs against the wall, grinding out these clean sheets. It's a very cultured and at times it almost seems easy way of managing games and of operating as a whole 11, specifically the outfield 10. It's the way they press, it's the way they manage games, it's the way they maneuver opponents into the positions they want them to be in. Not too dissimilar to when Sean Dyche would try and get players to shoot from specific areas of the pitch. We're doing a similar thing now where we're manoeuvring opponents into positions where they're less likely to score from. So I think Matt's gonna have to edit this. I got interrupted.
We have cameos in the podcast, people. For those of you who are listening through our podcast, that break in the audio was George had a surprise video in his little room under the stairs. So if you want to see what that was, head over to our YouTube channel and watch the video, because then that was quite amusing. George, I'm sorry we've interrupted your evening. Would you care to continue, sir?
No, I'm packing up and going home. No.
Back to Australia. Come on.
Yeah. So just, I guess the point was being that it's a whole outfield 10 operation, and because of that, it makes the defensive work light work, so to speak. Hand over to Rich.
That is fair. Rich, I always like to call on you for technical elements. Is there anything specifically like technical that these defenders are displaying? We know that CJ and Esteve particularly are just way and above too good for this league. But what is it about the actual defensive work that they do that's perhaps particularly impressive?
Listen, there is a little bit of, at times, we are doing a little bit of last minute blocking. I think Esteve kind of like cleared one off the line.
Saturday we did.
Yeah, but no, I thought George covered it really well. I think the whole team, wanted. I think sometimes you've got to want to defend. It's all well and good having a shape, but we've got a group. You look at Esteve and Egan Riley, two young centre halves. They enjoy defending.
Yeah.
Going back, going up a level and looking at Trent, as fantastic as he is on the ball, he doesn't want to defend.
No,
you can see. So you've got to have that mentality. So I think that's part. I think Parker is obviously. I think that's like why he likes playing Laurent, because, you know, against Hull in that first half, as well as we did play, Laurent made 3 tremendous interceptions, blocks, tackles, however you want to word it, you know, which nullified attacks. One thing is very clear, and we don't do it all the time, and I said it last season, we sit quite deep. We do allow teams, you know, to have the ball a little bit, and once they get into our half, we then smother them. You know, we don't defend on the halfway line like a lot of modern day teams do, so we don't really get caught with that ball over the top. I don't think once this season we've been caught with a big ball over the top. So, you know, it is easier to defend. You know, for your likes of Egan, Riley, and Esteve, when that ball's not coming over your shoulder and everything's in front of you, it is a hell of a lot easier. You know, that's where I feel sorry for, you know, for our defenders, you know, and Trafford last season, you know, because we were just it was literally like kind of like that clip on Game of Thrones with Jon Snow. He's kind of like facing everybody coming towards him. That's what it seemed like a bit for our defense. I think, you know, there's the willingness to defend more. We do set up more defensively. We play a bit like England did in under Southgate, ultimately with 2 holding midfielders, and at times Laurent does have the license to go forward a little bit more. And there's the old debate, isn't there? You know, do we want to release that handbrake a little bit more and be a little bit more open? Kind of say to our midfield, you know, to kind of our, you know, either that's Laurent in that position or somebody else, go forward a little bit more. And we've seen Laurent do that against Plymouth, and he was fantastic. So I think moving forward, we do need, you know, we can still be very, very solid, and I think we do need to release the handbrake a little bit. But like I said, if that Foster chance goes in just before half time, I don't think anybody's really complaining much on Saturday. So, like I said, I think it's a massive few games coming up for us with those fixtures Leeds and Sheffield's got. You know, we've got to start putting 3-4 wins together in the league now, rather than winning a game, drawing, because that's 4 points at this stage now. Every 2 games, I still don't think it's going to be enough to get us promoted because of the draws we've had before.
Yeah. We've used up our allowance of draws. We've got to do something more. Final word from you then, George, before we hand over. Anything that you want to see change ahead of the game on Friday night, or are we just literally same as and try and see if we can convert these chances? What do you want to see?
It'd be nice to hear an atmosphere at Turf Moor once in a while, wouldn't it? Let's be honest, like the home atmosphere, whether this will be, you know, up for debate in the months to come, and it's a wider topic.
There's a reason for it though, and I do have some sympathy for the challenges.
It's a wider topic, isn't it? Especially it's around football. It's not just around Burnley, but home atmosphere is just absolutely diabolical, and I was included, and it doesn't make it fun, and I'm not sitting here as someone who's singing my heart out, you know, every week. You know, I sit on the front row of the top tier. It's like you're not encouraged to sing because you just feel completely out of place. The sooner for me safe standing is expanded, it's the better. But so it's a wider topic that, but it's something I would like to see.
I had that at Southampton. Yeah, when we went down to Southampton for the cup, all of their away end is safe standing, and it was absolutely outstanding. Big fan. Was very sceptical. Bit worried about my dad. My dad was struggled a little bit standing up in the cold. He needed the opportunity to sit down. So I think if I was going to do it, we'd have to get my dad in one of the lower seats so that he can sit down and not have somebody stood in front of them. But yeah, it was really great. Sorry, I interrupted you. Carry on.
I think football's changed, hasn't it, though? Sorry to interrupt. Like, you know, now it's not end to end anymore. You know, there's not as many big tackles going in. It's about controlling the game. You know, like back in the day, like we get a free kick on the halfway line. You know, for whether you agree with it or not, you put it into the box. There'd be headers, bit of goal mouth action. Where now, say if we get a free kick where Connor Roberts plays on the halfway line, it goes. The other team drops a little bit deeper. And then we play it to Esteve, and it kind of takes a little bit of the flow out of the game. I think that's been a massive contributor. I think at Burnley, company season was terrible in the Premier League. We don't score a lot of goals at home. I wouldn't say there's a massive feel-good factor around Burnley at the moment, even though we're third. I'm hoping that we go on a little good run now. You know, we kind of get a beat Sheff Wednesday. You know, that for whether it's right or wrong, that Preston game now is gonna be really tasty, because Preston game has kind of felt a little bit irrelevant to us the last few years. So I think what's happened has added a bit of needle to it, rather than kind of like a friendly derby, if you will. So hopefully ultimately the atmosphere comes when you're winning football matches, doesn't it? So that's what we need to get back to. But I agree with George. I think you go and watch football now, and the atmosphere has largely gone from it, unfortunately. Like George says, I sit, me and George regularly bump into each other in the concourse. I sit in the James Hargreaves up, a fantastic view, and sometimes I almost don't sing because I'm so absorbed in the game and I'm quite tense. But then there will be times where I'm wanting to kind of sing along to We Are alongside Burnley, and I'm one of a handful of people, and you almost feel stupid doing it a little bit.
I don't ever feel stupid. I'm all right. I've got no shame. I start doing it. But yeah, no, it is an interesting point, and I think many of us are feeling the transition between what we understand football to be like and what we enjoy football as being, and how football is watched and consumed in 2025 by a whole new generation of fans. And it is always a real challenge when, football is most definitely one of the sports where its fans and its consumers don't like change, particularly those of us who've been watching for a good number of years. And it does feel uncomfortable, and it can make you feel a little bit like you're being left behind and that your voice isn't carrying. So yeah, I do get that. I do think that there have been some challenges. And I think to an extent, the board are trying to do something about that. They're trying to help fan experience. They're trying to help atmosphere. I don't know to what extent the forced atmosphere is credible or is going to make any difference. But they are aware of it, and they are trying.
I feel that in American sport, say NFL, say the Super Bowl. And by the way, I thought I don't want to sound like I'm too cool here, but I thought that Kendrick Lamar performance was unbelievable. But
it was amazing.
Sports and entertainment, and I think even if I might be wrong here because I've never been to America, just purely looking at it from somebody who loves sport and who teaches sport and who's studied American sport a little bit, is that whether they want to win, but it's a day out, it's entertainment, where we don't give a flying monkey.
Sorry,
I know I didn't really swear then. We don't give really care about a light show if the football's rubbish on the pitch.
Much more results over entertainment.
Yeah, and I think having American owners, they feel that just getting a light show or a drum or some goal music will automatically create the atmosphere, and it doesn't.
There's not the same sense of jeopardy in the States, but football in America is all about fairness. The franchises and the draft system enables every club to have their time in the spotlight, and it doesn't enable one club to be a dynasty for too long a period. They then fall over and it's somebody else's turn. In the UK, that doesn't happen in our sports. There is that sense of jeopardy. So watching football becomes a lot, there's more riding on it, and that does breed with it. It's we're invested in the result.
I also always think in life there's a nostalgia that it was better. Everything was better in time. So I remember, obviously George would have been very little, so I don't know how much he remembers. And I don't mean that sounds really patronising, and I genuinely don't mean it to be. But the Cottrell days, we would have 10,000 on at times.
Yeah, that's true.
And let's be honest, it wasn't I might be wrong here, but for my memory,
I don't think anybody's reminiscing about Clotterbull.
Yeah, but as a teenager, maybe I am wrong, but I don't remember the atmosphere always being unbelievable.
No, I think that's true actually.
For me, the best atmosphere was the times of Dyche's promotions in those early years in the Prem, when we knew what we were. We knew we were the plucky underdog, and we really got behind the team, and Turf Moor was a really difficult place to go. And I kind of even think the latter years of the Prem, maybe people got a bit tired of Dyche's football, the squad got a bit stale. I think it's been a long time since the atmosphere has been absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that is true. And I think when you go to away games, you see that other clubs have got the same challenges that we've got there. No, it's a good point. George, anything from you before we sign off for the week?
Nope, that's everything. I direct people. I was watching the BAFTAs last night, and when sometimes the person who wins the award doesn't want to take any claim, and he's like co-director will say, "Oh, but give applause for Mr. or Mrs. Director." That's what I'm doing here. In that, I'm just going to say, go and check out Natalie's tweet on Twitter where she's done a call to arms for ideas and agenda items for the fan advisory board meeting next week. So I'm pointing the finger at Natalie and saying, "Go." I
had no idea where you were going with that. Then I was genuinely concerned. I was like, let's not send people to my Twitter, please. That would be that. I was like, what tweet? What stupid thing have I said now? Because I have that in me. I have that ability to tweet something daft. I do that thing that you shouldn't do where I tweet emotionally. Do you know when they say never write an email mad at work? I should never tweet mad when I'm Burnley, because although you know what, it's organic. My Twitter's organic. You'll always get what I'm feeling. But then you always get somebody who acts me like 3 days later and calls me an imbecile. And I'm like, oh, come on. Context of the emotion of the game, my friend. Anyway, yes, please do. That is excellent. Thank you, George. We are on message, and I like this. This is very good. Listeners, we do have a fan advisory board meeting coming up on Tuesday, the 20-something. Next Tuesday, a week tomorrow. That was the 26th, I guess. And you do have 3 members of None and Ever on the fan advisory board, myself, George and Charlotte. So all of us are all open just to help this process and help fans be able to submit questions. I have pinned to the top of my Twitter page, and I've also posted it in the None and Ever Facebook group as well, for those of you who are members of that, an open thread where you can just submit any topics that you want raising. Can't promise that all of them will get raised. They might have to spread a couple of, we've had quite a lot of replies, and there are some common themes though, so a lot of it will be covered. But yes, do please get in touch and we will help to raise that. That is all we have time for this week's podcast. Thank you to George and to Rich for joining me this week to give me their thoughts following those 2 games, Wednesday and Saturday. We will be back probably on Thursday night with the preview show looking ahead to Sheff Wednesday. Myself and Dave Statman-Roberts will be able to put something out this weekend ahead of the game. And the rest of us will be back next week, which will hopefully be another 3 points at home, following Hull, not following Preston. Burnley will find their shooting boots. They'll take the handbrake off and we will just keep those points ticking along. While you're here, please subscribe to the podcast if you're listening either via your podcast channels or on YouTube. Drop that subscribe button. Click on notifications and make sure you never miss an episode. And if you've got any feedback, drop them in the comment section on our YouTube channel and we will respond as best we can. There's some real discussions going ahead on our YouTube channel, which is really great. That's all we've got time for right now. Listeners, take care until we see you next time. I've been Natalie Bromley. This has been the None and Ever podcast. Until next time.
The None and Ever podcast is brought to you in association with the talkSPORT Fan Network. Our host and editor is Natalie Bromley, and the show is produced by Matt Moss. Our resident statistician is Dave Roberts, and our FPL expert is Adam Dennett. The Analysis Show team is collectively Tom Whittaker, Rich Steele, George Poole, Charlotte Rigby, and Adam Dennett. Our music is provided by George Gaskell, and our newsletter team is headed up by Jamie Smith. If you don't already, you can subscribe to our newsletter by visiting nonenever.substack.com. Thanks as ever go to our partners talkSPORT. We are proud to be associated with the talkSPORT Fan Network.